Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Claire McEnery. Now, Claire might not be a famous name or a famous face, but she's got a very interesting story to tell. Formerly a senior figure in the police force, and now on the cusp of being ordained within the Church of England. So, Claire, it's lovely to welcome you to the Godcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really honoured to be asked. Thank you.
And just for people who don't know you, you're a Lancashire lass.
Very much, as you'll be able to tell from the accent.
So this is another very interesting journey from the secular world to the clerical world. Let's go back a bit, Claire, if we can. So your desire to join the police force, for example, when did that start? How old were you?
Well, there's a bit of a story behind everything I look into. So basically, it was my mother who put my application in for the police. I think she thought I was going a bit off the rails, and first I knew of it was an application had been submitted. And as time went on, I went through the various processes and started thinking, I could actually enjoy this. I could do this. It's quite competitive with the fitness and all the things you had to do. And before I knew it, I had an interview, a final interview, which didn't go exactly to plan, I have to say. And I thought, that's it. They don't want me anymore. That's not going to happen. So I nearly walked out the building, but I could see my mother's sullen face sat in the car. So I did wait. They'd asked me to wait outside, and I'm glad I waited because they came out and said that despite myself, I was going to become a member of the Lancashire Constabulary, which was the beginning of a long journey, let's say.
What did you learn from those formative years on the beat as a regular bobby?
Oh, so much. I talk about it in what I've written, but you do many hours, a lot of shoe leather, walking around towns on the day and on the night. And in those early stages, I have to say that one thing that was really quite interesting was that I felt a lot more comfortable on my beat than in the police station. I don't think that happens a great deal, maybe now, but I just felt it was very competitive in the police. You always felt under a spotlight. Whereas I went on my beat, and people said that it was quite a rough beat then. But for me, the people were very raw. They were very real. If they were angry, you knew it. If they were upset, you knew it. And there was no hiding behind a mask. It was very raw and very real. So what I learned at that early stage, we're talking 30 years ago, and things really have changed, and I witnessed that myself. But it was a very us and them in those days. There were disparaging names for them out there as opposed to the cops in here. It just, I look back at it in horror, really. And it did change a lot. The police was really professionalised a lot in the 30 years I spent there. But when I joined, there was a lot to be desired, if I'm honest. And I find it quite an eye opener.
Yeah. And were you a practicing Christian at this point, Claire? Were you somebody who was going to church, or did it come later?
No, not at all. Not at all. I come from a Christian family. Really, my family, my father and my mother, I've lost my dad now, but they were Christians. They were moral people, very good people, wonderful upbringing, but we weren't churchgoers in any way. In fact, religion wasn't talked about a great deal in our house at all, really. It wasn't. We'd go to a harvest festival if that's what the school were doing. But one interesting thing, at one point I was going off the rails, and I failed my 11 plus, and so my dad mustered all his money and sent me to a private school in Whalley, and it was a Catholic school, and we weren't Catholics, but nevertheless, money speaks, and we got in, and they thought I was going off the rails a little bit, and on one of my parents' evenings, my parents went in, and they were taken to one side, and they were told that the teachers there thought I had a vocation in ministry. that they could see some vocation in ministry, which was much to the surprise of my parents, let's say, who came home laughing and holding their bellies and saying, well, she's not even a Catholic, which of course changed the course of the rest of my school life, really, as they realised to the horror I wasn't a Catholic. So, yeah, so apart from that, not really an upbringing in...
Okay. Well, let's just park that for a second. Of course, we'll come back to that. But so you're in the police force, and you're doing your formative years there. Two questions really is one is, did you have aspirations to climb the ladder in the police force? And if so, tell us a bit about the struggles, or whether that was a very natural step up, and also some of the duties that you did, because you did become quite senior, didn't you?
Yes, towards the end. No interest in promotion for many years. I had a desperate interest in becoming a detective from within the first year of joining the police. I wanted to be. Managed to do that in about year 2, I think, and remained a detective for much of my service, although I did come back to uniform a couple of times through promotion. I was a detective, as in a detective constable, which I absolutely loved for about a good, I don't know, 15, 20 years, I think. I absolutely loved it. Started on the promotion train. I got my sergeant's exams, etc. And then once you've got one, it does tend to, you tend to take the next exam and the next exam. So, then I started with the promotions. What I will say is that it was tough in a lot of ways. Not just because I was a woman. I'm very self-depreciating, so I'm the type of person who'd say, "Oh, you're never going to guess what a mess I made of this." I'm just, and I'd even make it even more humorous and exaggerate it. But before you knew it, you walk in a room and people would be saying, "You know what she did." So it became more and more competitive as you sort of went up the ranks, and it could be there was a bit of bullying even. I've had to call people out on bullying. But also a lot of people that help you along the way. So the higher ranks, I had a lot of luck really, in so much as the whole regime changed. I think the chief constable at the time married a psychiatrist or something, and suddenly it went from, I'm the big I am, and I do this, and this fantastically, to them wanting people who would say, I'm not particularly good at this, and as a result of that, I have to do this. And I really do understand that I'm not great at everything. So they actually appreciated people that understood themselves a bit better. And I think that went in my favour in the last couple of promotions, really.
Which led to what were your promotions, Claire?
Yeah, so it's like when somebody talks to me about army, I don't really understand the ranks, So just basically, I was a detective superintendent when I retired. So that's sort of, your detective inspector would run your CID locally, perhaps, and a few departments, and then your chief inspector would probably oversee sort of that sort of town and all the crime and criminality that goes in that. And then the superintendent would tend to, for example, I worked at the headquarters and I was in charge of sort of sex offenders for the whole of Lancashire at one point, and public protection. So that was sort of another step, although you've always got somebody above you, wherever you are. And then I think in the end I worked, they also trained me in murder investigation. So I was starting on that journey as well, and ran some of the lower level, or rather, there's no lower level murder, is there? But the murders that were not as difficult to detect. Yeah. So I ended up doing that in the end as well.
You clearly have had a window on the other side of life then, haven't you? You have seen some of the extremities that go on in our society. could you just explain or describe some of those experiences, not in minute detail, but and to do that, to really understand how you dealt with that as an individual, you know, how it made you feel as a person.
Yeah. There was a big change when I was in the police, as you can imagine, where a lot of crime initially, you know, we would go to everybody's shed burglary and house burglary and then everything went online. So much crime, as you can imagine, is committed online. So if you think of the you know, child abuse online and abusive videos online. So the police had to change, and we don't have the amount of people to do that, you know, so necessarily. So criminality changed, and I at the same time was sort of going into the area of child protection, and I was in charge of child death, sudden death in adults as well. When you get into the higher ranks, you're the one that's called out in the night to see if a matter is suspicious or just tragic. I was a hostage negotiator and a suicide intervener, so you were getting called out in nights for that. So you were seeing a lot of death. You know, you were at a lot of post-mortems, children's post-mortems, adult post-mortems, and it's very hard to carry that stuff. And I've often been asked, how did I do it? Because a lot of my colleagues struggled and went off with PTSD. And, you know, I'll give you some examples of that. You know, I took a colleague to child post-mortem because they were going to be taking over that line of work. And it was a child's post-mortem, and that individual went home and couldn't pick his own child up that night, or the night after, or the night after. You know, that's PTSD. You know, you couldn't do it. You know, people can be sick. People can, you know, wake up in the middle of the night screaming. You know, but that makes, you know, you think, well, why do I keep doing that? How do I keep doing that? I do think that the reason they put me in that position for such a prolonged time was because I don't have children myself. Maybe that helped. For me, though, there is something in this that's really important, and it's important in the role I'm doing now as well, which is that tragedy is not my tragedy. That tragedy, as awful as it is, and as much empathy as I've got, is their tragedy. It's the family's tragedy. It's the family of the murder victims' tragedy, the family of the suiciders' tragedy, or the parents of the child. It's the worst day of their lives, but it's not my personal tragedy. And at the time, I used to feel that I could put that in a box. It's not a box that you can't open, but it's a box that's away from me and my life, and I deal with that professionally. Now, funnily enough, I feel like anything like that I take to the foot of the cross. So obviously that's where my faith has helped me to change my thinking on that. And I lay it at Jesus' feet because he can carry the load a lot better and easier than I can. But I think that's where people struggle, is when they hold it as their own tragedy and their own upset. So I think that's something learned early on.
So I take from that, even in those senior roles, you weren't kind of a full-on Christian at that point.
No, I've had it's strange actually when I look back because it's all in hindsight. But you know, I've been in various church settings, you know, like everybody else's, weddings, funerals, that kind of thing. And I always became very emotionally involved with that. And I remember a couple of times this cop that's never cried in 30 years, and I'd sit in my car and, you know, hold my steering wheel, and I'd be, why am I getting upset in this church? You know, so there's always something there that was kind of pulling me in, and I think probably I was like resisting that. So in hindsight, I can see that there was that, and also, you know, when you stood looking at a child on a post-mortem slab, you know, if you don't think that that child, the essence of that child is somewhere else, I don't know how you cope. You know, I don't know how you cope. So for me, the belief in the afterlife was always, it's just no question about it, you know. So I think so that would be connected to faith, clearly, you know. So and have I said a prayer over, you know, situations like that before a 5-hour operation that I'm going to watch in front of me? Yes, I have, and I just didn't label it as faith at the time. I didn't quite put a label on it.
Yeah, so something I'm really keen to ask Claire is about the perpetrator of the crime and how your emotions and your feelings were to the perpetrator at the time, and perhaps now how they are now, whatever it is, how many years it is since you've retired. Has that changed as your faith has evolved?
No. So I'll just tell you perhaps one story about that. When I took over a department that had, I think it started with 1,400 sexual offenders, ended up with 1,800. So people on the sex offenders register. So these are everything from serial rapists, and believe me, there are serial rapists. You know, they do get chance after chance. I could talk about that. And right through to child abusers, to, you know, everything in that bag. And I ran teams of offender managers, police officers that managed those individuals in the community. I was also a MAPA chair, which means a multi-agency public protection chair, that manages the worst criminality that's coming out of the prison estates and into the community, or from psychiatric units. And when I took over that department, I saw the way that police officers treated sex offenders, and basically we were threatening, we were abusive, in my opinion. The way, it was just the way, you know, we treated them as dirt on your shoe. And some people would say, well, so they should be. And to me, you'll get no reciprocity from that. You'll get nothing back from that. So I wanted to change that quite radically. And I wanted the offender managers to treat them very firmly, to manage them, but to treat them with dignity, because they were still human beings. And no human being will relate to being told they're a dirty, horrible, filthy paedophile. They'll never change. They may never change anyway, but they will, you know, they'll never respond to that. So what happened was, I had a boss that I went to, and they said, it's your department, do what you want. So I changed the way that we managed those individuals, or I made provision to change. And I offered people, if they wanted to leave the department, they could. And a few did. But I'll tell you what, Alec, you know, when you get a sex offender that rings up the department and asks to speak to their offender manager and says, I've been on a bus today and I can't stop looking at that little boy that travels in front of me, and my urges are getting stronger and stronger. Help me. You know, when you get that phone call, rather than dealing with that child in the after effect, you think to yourself, you've got something right. And that's how I saw it. I saw that people, whoever they are, you know, I can't imagine Jesus Christ walking up to anybody and treating them like dirt on his shoe. It wouldn't have done it, you know. He would have. He was never a gentle Jesus, you know. That's one thing I've learned. But he would be honest. He'd be straightforward. He'd be transparent. But he would not treat them with disrespect, you know. And so that's how I kind of.
I find that an extraordinary example of Christian witness, Claire. You know, to not just think about the victim, but the potential perpetrator. But of course, you know, some people might watch this and be screaming at the,
yeah,
you know, saying he deserves to be, he, or not just he, she deserves to have the things whipped away. And so how do you hold that tension of people wanting retribution? It's all very well you and I, or similar to us in that vein, seeking a kind of gentle, that humanity aspect to it. But when you've got Joe Bloggs off the estate saying, oh, I'm going to kill him, and you understand that sentiment, how do you hold that tension?
Yeah, absolutely understand that sentiment. And of course, like I say, it's not my tragedy. If it was my child that had been abused, I can't say I would sit here with the same emotion, and I'd have to deal with it very differently. But for me, these people deserve to go to prison for a long time, to be rehabilitated if they ever could be. But people used to say, I used to hear people so much anger. 10 years should mean 10 years. 10 years should mean 10 years. Now, okay, it should be 20. We all know that, but there's other issues with that. But if you said somebody's 10 years and they should come out after 10 years, and I'm sick of it, they're being let out after 7. And I'll say, no, you're so wrong. You are so wrong from a management perspective of that individual. I want them out at 8 years. I want them out where I can put conditions on them. So you imagine somebody at the end of a 10-year sentence, somebody like me is told to manage them. I have nothing on them. They say, I'm coming out of prison. I've done my sentence. See you later, cops. Come out at 8 years, and I can monitor what they're looking at online. I can have police officers walk into the house and put a dongle into their machine and find out what they're looking at. I can make sure they're not on the street after 6 o'clock at night. I can put them on a curfew. I can make plans of where they're allowed to live, which isn't near a school. I'm talking about if it was obviously a child sex offender. I can put all sorts of conditions with probation around that individual to manage them going forward. But if they come out at 10 years, they're just out, and there's nothing. So yeah, as far as that's concerned, as far as retribution's concerned, at one point we got paedophile hunters, they were called, or these vigilantes. Well, let me tell you a few stories about the vigilantes who get lots of social media. People love them, but they have done so much harm. Sometimes, I've seen it. The wrong people get their houses firebombed because of information that these guys have put out. They can go fishing online for somebody to meet a child, and that individual might be someone who's got the mental age of 7 but looks like a man. I've personally dealt with people that have been enticed in by these so-called vigilante hunters who have then had to deal with on bridges about to take their lives. So there's so much, so when we release a sex offender, there are things put in place to manage that individual going forward. I made a big agreement with the Samaritans to ring them on day 1 and 2 after they've been released. But this doesn't happen with these individuals. There's a lot of danger around that. So we have to manage criminals in a way that's humane. We have to, because we'll just, the world cannot function if people, want heads on sticks. We've seen how that turns out in, police riots, and so it's just important for me to, we have to keep some legislation and laws around that. We have to.
Claire, this interview is absolutely whizzing by, and I'm mindful of time, so let's get to the bit of the church stuff.
Yep.
So we're going to skip the early formative years of your faith, but you go to church and you get this calling. Just tell us quickly about the calling, because a lot of people, it's like, I'm sure you've already got this. I get it almost every day. What made you want to become a priest?
What made you a vicar?
Okay. Become a vicar.
Yeah, very quick. I was coming up to retirement. I was actually looking forward to it. It turns out that my safeguarding skills were really desirable in the secular world. It turns out he was on catch up for those things, and I had lots of offers, and it was all looking pretty rosy. I was going to spend some time in Turkey. Somehow, God had a different plan. They tell me it's called a conversion experience. I think it was probably a collision of various things in my life, but one way or another, I found that God had a different call on my life. It take too long. I'm more than happy to, but it take too long to talk about the conversion experience. But as a result of that, I thought, right, my life's got to change. All my blessings and everything that I've had, I've got to turn back into the world and put back something back into the world. I was thinking very much of, my first thoughts were get on a plane and go to Africa and starving children, that kind of, I didn't know what it meant really. What did happen?
Claire, very, very interestingly, this did you take you in a direction of safeguarding, didn't it? And I'm interested to hear about this because I'm on General Synod. And to sit through some really kind of moments about safeguarding within the Church of England, and some of the stories that I've been witness to have been horrifying. Now, you undertook a review, didn't you? Just tell us about that.
I did, yeah. So basically, I ended up in a church. I got confirmed. The bishop said to me, the Church of England needs to hear what you've got to say. I was like, well, that's a strange thing to say to somebody like me. Went home, never thought anything about it, and out of the blue, a phone call from the diocese asking me, as an ex-retired safeguarding lead, can you review the Church of England's safeguarding going back 40, 50 years? So basically, that was something called PCR2, Pass Case Review, the second time they'd done it. So I spent 12 months in Blackburn Diocese, 12 months in Chester Diocese after that, where I can honestly say the Church of England opened the doors to their files, their HR files, every clergyman, man and woman's files, lay people's files, and they opened the doors and said, there are the dusty files, crack on, look through them, find safeguarding issues. I spent a long time with a colleague doing that, and eventually I wrote a report about how to keep the church safe going forward, which was wonderful to be able to do, and also addressing some safeguarding concerns, some real hoo-haws or whatever you call them, addressing those going over the last 40 years. And, as a result of that, some individuals, let's say, left the organisation.
Were you shocked by what was revealed or not?
What I will say is that transparency was great. I didn't feel at all that we were being sort of shoehorned in anywhere. Transparency was great in both dioceses. What I will say is going back, the further you went back, the worse it was. You'd have, it's obviously there's a lot of confidentiality around it, but you'd have things that you would read and go, really? He took his word for that? You can imagine. And as you came further forward, the better it got, the less concerning it was. There is clergy members are very forgiving people. They want to give people second chances. Difficult to give a sex offender a second chance. I think they learned that the hard way. Priests that aren't allowed to marry, there's a whole area opens up there, or can do in certain circumstances. That can be misdirected elsewhere. There was a lot of issues, but they genuinely, you could see the safeguarding coming in as you went further forward. Very open, even our bishops, who we have today, their own files, absolutely laid bare and open for you. Feedback given if necessary, so it was very openly welcomed at that time.
Very reassuring to hear. Lovely, really
very
good to hear that.
Going the right way.
And now you're on the cusp of being ordained. Just tell us about your training period. Has that been a joyful time? Has it been challenging? Just share that, a little bit of that.
It's been great. It's been exciting. It's been enjoyable. It's 3 years training, part-time. I'm working in a church in Clayton at the moment. Lots of opportunities within that church. Been very blessed with an incumbent who's just says, get on with it. So lots of church. We go on formation, which is down to Derbyshire on a lot of weekends. And that's really... it's just interesting. It's also, I have to remember that the church is also an organisation, and if they say a prayer in in front of something, it doesn't mean they're any different than any other organisation, So there's people of all different characters, and you kind of go in thinking that priests and vicars are these, amazingly different people. They're not. They're just like us. But what I have, I've struggled with some of. Well, I haven't struggled with it, but the academia is difficult when you're 55 years old and you're suddenly having to write academic essays. I'm not the best at it, but I'm getting through. And fascinating to understand more about the Bible, and how the Old Testament runs into the New Testament, and it's an ongoing story of God's God's intervention with us, and it's just fabulous. I've enjoyed it a lot.
And what about in kind of engagement with church politics, Claire? I mean, I do remember I've been ordained 8 years, and I remember being so excited, so full of eagerness and anticipation to get on and start doing the job. And 8 years on from there, not wishing to suck any of the joy out of what's going to happen to you. You do slowly learn about the church politics. Is that discussed and talked about either in the common room at college or in studies?
It's really interesting. I think as soon as I realised that I come from a large organisation to a large organisation, so as soon as I sort of got that in my head, that it's like any other large organisation with lots of diverse views, and you've got people who are keen to move on and keep I think that helped me. The coming from the background that I've come, I find it fascinating about denominations, and about some people will be absolutely horrified if you've got if you've not got silverware on the altar, and another church is not bothered, and it's Ribena and crackers and a wooden chalice. I find it fascinating that people can have such diverse views on that, and diverse views on baptism and this, that, the other. For me, the central thing is God and Jesus. So from an outsider's perspective, I kind of look in and go, wow, that's like amazing that there's so many different perspectives. I've come from an organisation that said, we respected diversity, and then theologically people disagree with that, and you're like, right, so how does that work? So it's fascinating to be involved with. I've met some amazingly wonderful tutors who will answer your questions, because I'm someone who'll say, well, explain that to me. That's what you think. Explain it to me, and convince me. What I don't like is anybody who has an opinion but doesn't want to engage with you on that opinion. If you've got that opinion, then hold it out there and talk to us about it and tell me about it. Don't sort of have a covert opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that's my thing. But I have to say that there's some it's wonderful to be with so many different people. I mean, the different worship alone, like some people are like, yeah, and other people are like, oh, it's got to be traditional hymns.
This is, for people who are listening, this is Emmanuel College, isn't it, that you're with?
Yeah. So
and Claire, as we kind of we're running on over time, but it's been so interesting. We went to the Holy Land together, not just you and I, of course. We went with a few other people. on a pilgrimage, and I'd been a few years before, and Bishop Philip, the Bishop of Blackburn, said to me that it will change your outlook and your ministry forever. And because I haven't really seen you much since then, do you believe that to be the case for yourself?
Oh, it's just amazing in practical ways as well. You know, like when you read the Bible and it's talking about a place, you think, "I've been there, I know how to get there." And you know, when Jesus walks over it, oh, it's quite a long way. Just simply like that, but also just to it just there's something about you know, the emotion wells up in you in that place. You know, you can just, and I never understood the significance of Israel and its history, and you know, obviously there's so much going on there at the minute, and so many innocents caught up in all that, so much, but yeah, it just I don't know, it cemented everything, it brought everything alive, and you know, it's somewhere that there's a part of your heart goes out to that place. You know, you want to go back. You know, you feel that pull. So it's an amazing place, and to feel obviously I had a conversion experience, and I had so much emotion, and then you go through a period of time where you're so annoyed about that emotion. I don't want that emotion every time I pray, and then you go through a stage of like, where's that emotion gone? Where's that emotion gone? You know, and
Yeah,
then I want that emotion back, and then it's like a roller coaster. It's just amazing. But you know, when I went to the Holy Land, that emotion is there, isn't it? It's just
yeah,
fabulous.
it's very stark. Yeah.
Oh, honestly, so couldn't recommend
It,
going to the Holy Land highly enough.
yeah, and just to bring this interview to a close, Claire, you've put your thoughts to print, haven't you? Just tell us what
Oh,
you think about the publication. Give it a
yeah.
plug and a
Give it a
promo. Go for it.
well. Give it a well. And yeah, I was actually commissioned by out the blue. I spoke to somebody. I was doing a funeral for somebody, and somebody at the funeral spoke to me about my sort of past, and how I'd ended up training as vicar. Next thing, a company called Tortoise Media in London contacted me and said, "Would you be interested in putting some of your thoughts down?" So they create these little quarterlies. It's called Tortoise Quarterly. It's called Faith. This particular book. Lots of different stories. Mine's in there, and there's a podcast as well. So it's the story of policing and how I became a priest. But actually, I think there's more of that about how um, people don't have the blessings that we have. You know, my life has been a dream compared to an individual, for example, that I talk about in the book called Stuart, and it really does give you that sense of, you know, how dare we judge people when they've had everything so different than us. We don't realize how privileged we are. Wow. And so if anything comes out of that, I just hope that somebody would sort of read the story of Stuart, which is one of the stories in there about a man who unfortunately is with us now, but had no chance in life, you know. So you can, I've written it down here actually because I'm not brilliant how to get it. The quarterly, if you just go onto Tortoise Media and you mention the name Shell Out, apparently you can get 20% discount off that. And there's a podcast on the Slow Newscast, Tortoise Media. If you just put Claire McEnery in Google and put it was a privilege to do.
Claire, it's been a privilege talking to you. You are an inspiring lady, and I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you. I wish you all the best for. I wish you all the best for the forthcoming ordination. You're very much in my prayers, as all the ordinands, and I hope the next part of your journey is as fruitful and as extraordinary as the previous part. So thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks very much.
There's Claire McEnery on the Godcast. If anybody would like to check out any other interviews, just Google the Godcast. There's a whole feature to clerics, to bishops, ordinands, priests and people generally interested in faith, but there's also musical inspiration, people from the musical world, journalists, politicians, you name it. There's something for everybody. So do, if you've enjoyed this interview with Claire, then do check out the Godcast. Claire, we send our love. We're not too far away. We send our love from Burnley, a few miles down the road, and thank you again for coming on the Godcast.
Thanks a lot. See you later.